Church wants to sue me for a review, by user massive discount 845. I'm from Germany. We are a very litigious society, so much so that businesses can sue individuals for writing bad reviews. In fact, per German law, it's up to the individual to provide evidence that what they wrote actually happened, or else the individual can be forced to take down the review and pay legal costs to the business. I'm a tradesman and did some renovation work for a church in a small town. The church did not pay me. I take 50% up front and the church had cheated me out of the second half after I had completed the job. The church only had one other review. I wrote a review stating that I had been cheated by the church. I promptly got a legal letter from the church demanding to take it down unless I wanted to be brought to court. The church could easily argue that they paid me in cash and I would be out of luck according to German law. Okay. I complied with their demand. I took down the review and posted a new one stating that I'm a tradesman and the church threatened to sue me for writing a simple review. I also attached the legal letter from the church as an image in the review. Fast forward a few months, I received an angry call from the clergyman. He said my review had caused several tradesmen to either ghost him or ask him for complete payment up front. He claimed that I had cost them thousands and that I would burn in hell for hindering God's work. I then asked him, "What is your religion's founder's view on honesty, compassion, and forgiveness?" Cue a moment of radio silence, followed by him hanging up the phone. No legal letter yet, anyhow I can now substantiate my review. Dealership pulled bait and switch, it cost them over $50,000, by user expensive __ support. The city I live in has extremely inflated vehicle values compared to the surrounding areas. If you buy the same car from a neighboring state, you can often save $3,000 to $4,000 without really trying. When I buy a new vehicle, which happens every 3 to 4 years, I always look in the surrounding states to compare pricing. This story happened about 5 years ago and the malicious compliance is still ongoing to this day. I was shopping for a new car, brand new, and found one that matched my specs about 12 hours away in a neighboring state. It was priced about $5,000 below comps. After looking up flights, there was a one-way direct flight that took me to their local airport for around $175. Plus the gas to drive back. I was looking at a total of maybe $275 to save $5,000. Absolutely worth it in this situation. I reached out to the dealership, negotiated a bit and agreed on a price. I let them know that I would be flying in to pick up the car and offered to pay in full in advance of the flight. They told me that all they needed was a $1,000 deposit and that the car was considered mine. We signed a contract and I paid the deposit. And then I booked the flight, for 3 days from then. First sign of things gone awry. When I showed up at the airport, the dealership was supposed to pick me up. This had been arranged in advance. A quick phone call later and I grabbed an Uber to take me the 20 miles to the dealership with the promise of them covering that cost. No big deal either way. Second sign of things gone awry. When I showed up at the dealership, the salesman I had been speaking with asked me if I wanted to walk the lot with him to look at a few cars. Yes, cars. Plural. Questioning what he meant by that, we walked into the lot to see these cars that he was talking about. Were these some special type of gold inlaid, full self-driving, full self-flying, amaze mobiles? No. They were not. When I point blank asked to see the car that I was buying, the one with VIN XYZ listed in this signed contract with a deposit on it, I was told it was no longer available. The salesman offered to show me similar cars which would have been fine were we able to come to similar terms on pricing, but all of these cars outrageously priced, think $2,000 over MSRP instead of $5,000 under MSRP. Important note for later, there was never a mention, or any paperwork, signage, etc., of any incentives for giving 5-star reviews. Fast forward 2 to 3 hours. I am now convinced this dealership never had this specific car on the lot and that this was 100% a bait and switch gone wrong. The dealership was unwilling to sell me a similar vehicle at a similar price to our negotiated one, we were over $5,000 apart, and were unwilling to pay the flight costs for this bait and switch scenario. A heated discussion ensued between myself and the GM where he told me to go ahead and leave a bad review but that I wasn't getting any free money from him. I took an Uber to a nearby hotel and booked a flight back home for the next day. Total cost? Around $750. Cue malicious compliance. This dealership had an average Google rating of right around 4.5 stars and around 400 total reviews. Pretty solid for a dealership. That night, while I was sitting in the hotel room, I had some time to burn. I spent a couple of hours creating new email accounts just so that I could leave multiple reviews for this dealership. All said and done, I had left around 21-star reviews over the course of that night and then sort of stopped caring about the reviews. At this point my focus shifted to recovering my lost travel expenses. A few days after getting back, I sent the dealership a demand letter for $750, which they promptly ignored. Since we had done the original contract, with the deposit, in both states, I was allowed to file a small claim suit in my state, which I did. The dealership never showed up to court and I received a default judgment for $750. I did collect that, by the way. It took a few certified letters, a few phone calls, and about a year, but I did get a check for $750. As you can imagine, I was still not a happy camper. What they had done was wrong on so many levels. All of my friends knew the story of how I was bait and switched, and the fact that I flew to the dealership on a one-way ticket only made it that much worse. They had all left a bad review or two, but nothing more than a normal mad customer. Cue malicious compliance, long term. I don't know how it started or how it ended up lasting as long as it has, but at some point I had some time on my hands and left a bad review for this dealership. Just one. Not two. Not three. One. In doing so, I noticed that all of the reviews I had left right after leaving the dealership were gone. Probably taken down for being fake or because I had left so many at the same time and the dealership reported them. I wanted to make sure this dealership wouldn't do this to someone else. So the next day, I checked to make sure that one bad review I had just left was still there. It was, and since I was thinking about it, I went ahead and created another account and left another 1-star review. Fast forward 2 to 3 years. It has now become a habit. Every time I have a few minutes to spare, I create a new account and leave a 1-star review for this dealership. Their current rating? 1.9 stars with nearly 3.5k total reviews. I am personally responsible for at least half of those reviews. When you open the dealer's website, one of the large banners that flashes across the screen advertises $50 for a 5-star review, something about showing the review to your salesman to get a $50 Visa gift card. It has been this way since about a year after this bait and switch occurred, right around the time the 1-star reviews began to accumulate. Assuming I am responsible for half of their reviews and the fact that the dealership only has 3.5k total reviews, they have paid $50 per review for at least 1,000 reviews, likely more than that. Meaning, they have implemented a policy to pay for reviews, have spent $50,000 doing so, and have still seen their average rating drop consistently since telling me to go ahead and leave a bad review. Edited to add, yes, I got my $1,000 deposit back. I paid with a CC and it was refunded without issue. I couldn't sue for time spent or force the contract to be honored because I sued in small claims court, time spent not allowable and contract too high of a value for small claims. And yes, the case was 100% winnable if I were to have sued to force the contract to be honored. But legal fees, I would have needed to hire an attorney, and the additional time spent meant this was just not worth pursuing. And finally, no, I will not provide the name of the dealership. I know that some companies sue people who leave reviews. I am not willing to risk that, so will continue to remain anonymous, and allow the dealership to do the same. I did report their review practice, along with screenshots showing that they are offering payment for 5-star reviews, to Google, etc. If anything happens, I'll update this post, though I would expect that may take months/years. Was denied 2 days of paid PTO, so I took off a whole month, by user 1st responder. When I worked corrections, I requested for 2 weeks off. I had been there for years and accrued plenty of paid leave. It was given to me as I had done so months in advance for a personal event. The 2 weeks went by, way too quick. I had specifically lined up my 2-week break to lead into my 2 days off at the beginning of the break and at the end so I could maximize my time off. However, during my normal off days a family emergency came up that was quite serious, so I asked for another 2 days off to handle my situation. I was told by my direct supervisor that there was no way she was approving that, because we are only allowed to use 84 hours of leave in one continuous block, given our rotating written schedules and 12-hour shifts, this equaled 2 weeks, and she ordered me to come in the next day, or I would receive a write-up. I didn't argue because I knew she was correct, so I showed up that night and reported for my shift, and much to my surprise, my captain had called out sick, so a relief captain came in to fill her shift. I asked him to give me the next day off after my shift was over. He and I had a rapport given the number of years we've worked with each other previously, and so he looked at the schedule and my leave. He said, "You know you've got plenty of leave, right?" "Yes, I know. I just need some of it to handle my business tomorrow." "No, I mean you've got plenty of leave to take, and get roster is filled the next 2 weeks. Yeah, I just got off a 2-week vacancy. I stopped because he winked at me. And it finally clicked. We can only take up to 2 weeks off consecutively. Nothing says we can't take off 2 weeks, come in for, say, an hour. Then go home and take off another 2 weeks. So I did, and he signed in the paperwork stating, "It's not my shift." Fuck that bitch. I handled my emergency literally the next day. It turned out to not be as serious as we thought, and then enjoyed another paid 2 weeks off from work. It was great. To add to the bliss, I reported back from work to find out that this captain was fired and replaced for some kind of negligence or something. It was a great month. Edit, the captain I worked for was fired. The captain everyone liked who have me the PDO stayed for a couple more years before retiring. New boss destroys everything for everyone, by user you mess it up 12. Buckle up. This is a long one. Obligatory on mobile, English is my first language so all typos are my fault. No TLDR because fuck that. I spent the time to write all this out so you can read it or move on. I worked for this tech company for almost 7 years. It was my first job out of college. Great company, huge growth, great benefits, and most importantly an incredible boss. The boss was super helpful and responsive, always had the team's back, goes out of his way to not micromanage, didn't care as long as the work got done, borderline forced people to take PDO, we have unlimited and I averaged 30 to 40 days off a year, and believed in giving good workers big raises and promotions. Last 3 years I got 9%, 13%, and a promotion and 7% raises. We worked remote through COVID and I asked to change my contract to fully remote so I could leave the HCOL city where the office was based to go back to my hometown. Boss approved the change, and when HR tried to do a COL adjustment to my salary, boss told them no because I'll be doing the same work in my new location. The boss was so good that on our team of 16 people the lowest tenured was 3.5 years. I'd been offered several other jobs with salary increases throughout the years but could never bring myself to leave. Myself and one other person on my team had specialized into working on very complex and involved projects. These were significantly different than the team's normal day-to-day work. We'd been doing the complex projects for 4+ years and were the knowledge base for the company in that area. Boss left that area completely to us to manage. As the volume picked up we added and trained 2 more people to our little sub-team to help out. None of these projects went out to the customers without one of us 4 being involved. Super complex, $100K to millions lost if a mistake was made, and since it was the fastest growing part of the business by far, we were super busy. Now around 2 years ago, boss's boss gets promoted from his VP role up to an SVP spot. And hires a new VP. This new VP comes in and tries to change a lot very quickly. Tries to make everything a trackable metric. Even where it really doesn't make sense. I.e. tracking the number of projects each person on my team did every month. Counted as one even if it was super complex and took 2 weeks or if it was very simple with an existing customer and took an hour. Wanted each project to go out faster, even if they weren't due for a week we were supposed to get them out in under 3 days. Tried to force my boss to assign work to the team instead of us all picking up from a central queue as we could. ECT. Boss pushed back as much as possible but was getting shit on constantly by new VP because the useless metrics VP wanted us tracked by did not meet his super unrealistic expectations. Despite my boss's team being the most experienced and efficient in the company and doing significantly more volume and more complex work than any other team. About 9 months ago boss had enough of just getting consistently shit on by VP and took a new job and left. Boss had been with the company for 13 years and was one of the first few 100 employees. My whole team was devastated. We all instantly started lobbying for the most tenured person on our team to get promoted into that role as she would have the same philosophy as the boss that just left. VP interviews most tenured, and a bunch of external candidates. And goes with someone from his previous company. Now this lady will be referred to as bitch boss from here on out for soon to be obvious reasons. She came in and completely destroyed the team from top to bottom. Changed processes that had been perfected for years, did not listen or care about what anyone else had to say. Started micromanaging to the extreme. Team morale dropped like a rock. It took less than a month for the team's output to crater due to all of her changes. The team from the best in the company to the worst. It took bitch boss about 2 months to get to my smaller sub-team and try to rework our processes. Bitch boss started micromanaging projects, having no idea what she's doing, and causing all kinds of issues and delays. She started getting on us for about our metrics being the worst on the team. Despite us working on the super complex projects that took 10 to 100 times longer on average than most of the work the rest of the team did. Bitch boss told us that if we didn't meet the expected metrics we would be put on pips. So we decided to comply and focused all of our efforts on simple projects to meet the metric, X number of projects completed per month per person, and left the complex ones sitting in the queue. This caused chaos as my small sub-team suddenly stopped picking up complex projects and just focused on completing simple projects to get our metrics up. Very quickly the sales team is freaking out because deals are getting delayed and their huge commission checks from the complex projects are being put in jeopardy. When they came to us to ask when we were going to complete the complex projects, we all gave the same response: bitch boss has told us we have to focus all of our efforts on meeting metric X, so we will only be doing that. Unfortunately that means we can no longer complete the complex projects. Please contact bitch boss for help getting them completed. This did not go over well with her ORVP as he started to get complaints as well. They called a meeting and told us we had to go back to doing the complex projects. We refused as that made it impossible to meet the metrics they created to measure our performance. They refused to drop the metric but still insisted we work on the complex ones as we were the only ones with the knowledge. We still refused. This resulted in a lot more complaints from sales until the SVP got involved. The SVP was the one who created the complex sub-team to begin with and sided with us against the VP and bitch boss. He said we were not to be measured by the metrics and can go back to managing the complex stuff without fear of being put on a pip. So we did. At this point the other 3 people on the sub-team had seen the writing on the wall and were all actively applying and trying to leave ASAP. They were all office-based in the HCOL area still. Bitch boss changed the team from come in 1 to 2 days a week as needed to mandatory 3 days in the office. Most company policy would let her. So they got a lot more of her BS than I did remote. I had not been applying because I was distracted. My old boss had approved 2 weeks of vacation for my wedding/honeymoon before he left. This happened to occur about 3 months after bitch boss started. And about a month after the whole pip blow up. Bitch boss was pissed at how we showed her up in front of the SVP and was doing everything she could to make our life miserable. In that month, the other super experienced guy and my best friend on the sub-team got a new job and left, no notice, and one of the other guys on the sub-team has put in his notice and only had a week left. We were already slammed and still behind from the pip fiasco, so losing half the sub-team just made that worse. Plus with morale so low we didn't bother to put in any extra effort anymore. In fact the whole team was significantly behind as 6 of the 16 people had left or were on their notice periods at that point. So bitch boss decided that she was cancelling my already approved wedding leave because of how far the team was behind. She told me over Zoom. I told her there was no chance I'm missing my wedding and honeymoon for work and I'm taking the full leave and it's up to her if she wants to lose another person from the sub-team for 2 weeks or permanently. She said, yelled, and threatened until I just left the Zoom call. She followed up with an email officially notifying me my leave was cancelled and if I didn't show up it would be considered job abandonment. I called her bluff and replied ceasing VP and SVP and some other sales VPs who I worked with regularly, explaining the situation, it's my wedding honeymoon, and that I appreciated the opportunity but was quitting immediately with no notice due to the disrespect from bitch boss. I got Slack messages from SVP and several of the sales VPs almost immediately asking me not to quit. The email chain itself blew up with complaints about how my team was mismanaged by bitch boss and how now more complex deals were going to get lost because I wouldn't be there at all to work on them. ECT. SVP eventually shut it down, but it was a fun read. I didn't reply to the Slack messages or do any work the rest of that day. Just turned everything off and went to a bar and had a good time. I woke up the next day late in the morning, and very hungover, to a few voicemails on my phone from SVP asking me to call him. I called back in the early afternoon and talked to the SVP. He was very understanding, asked me to come back. Listened to all my complaints and eventually made an offer. Basically if I came back and worked the rest of the week and tried to train a few team members to work on complex stuff to cover while I was gone, he would give me a $3,000 wedding bonus, I would get my full PTO, and when I got back bitch boss would leave me alone and let me manage the complex stuff and pick 2 more people to permanently train back onto the sub-team to backfill what we had lost. I accepted, weddings are fucking expensive. So I tried to train people to cover for me, impossible task, then leave on my PTO. I had a great wedding and honeymoon. VP called me a few times when the 4th guy from my sub-team quit with no notice about 1.5 weeks in, but I ignored him and didn't respond. I come back refreshed and ready for the shit show I know is waiting. It was chaos. All the salespeople were slacking and emailing me about all the complex things they needed done 2 weeks ago. The people I quickly trained before leaving hadn't been able to do almost anything. There was a huge backlog for the entire team as half of the original 16-person team was gone at this point. I turned off my Slack and emailed the sales VPs directly asking them to give me a prioritized list of all the complex deals they needed done. Got the list and started working through it in my normal working hours, nothing more. Bitch boss never tried to talk to me or interfere. VP did a few times. At one point he tried to make me work weekends to catch up, I refused. This went on for about a month or so. Bitch boss never mentioned me training people to replace my sub-team and I never brought it up. They did however have the larger team try some of the smaller complex projects to help get them out. They also hired some new people for the larger team. The normal 4 to 6 month training process my old boss developed was ignored and the new hires were just thrown in the deep end, which resulted in new hires making mistakes that cost the company a lot of money. This brought us to annual bonus and raise time. I had started frantically job hunting as soon as I got back from the honeymoon. I got some interviews, was in same later stages but no offers yet. I had a Zoom meeting invite from bitch boss to go over my bonus/raise. She decided it would be a great idea to give me 80% of my expected bonus, lowest possible, and a 0% raise. Justified it with a bunch of BS, not a team player, metrics bad, blaming me for mistakes made by new hires, etc. I didn't really argue or care at that point. At that point I really quiet quit. Cut my daily output to below half, just did the bare minimum and waited for the bonus to come in with my next paycheck 2 weeks later. At this point the sales team is getting pissed because the complex stuff basically isn't getting done. I had almost caught up on the important ones before the raise/bonus but with me barely working everything was falling behind again. Bitch boss smelled weakness and showed up on one of the progress calls I had with sales. The project was running about 1.5 weeks behind at that point. She started chewing me out on the call in front of everyone saying I was lazy and not doing my job etc. I let her rant then just said if you give me the lowest bonus possible and a 0% raise you get 0% effort in return. You can complete this project since I'm so terrible at my job and left the call. She tried a few more times on email chains etc. to call me out for not working and I just replied with the same thing. I refused to join her Zoom calls or respond to her on Slack. And just responded with the 0% effort blurb on every email. This infuriated her. I still hadn't gotten another job offer but was really confident I was about to get one soon. So when VP set up a Zoom call with me I joined. He tried to play nice and ask what the problems were and pretended to be on my side. I told him for a 0% raise I'm giving 0% effort and he pretended like he had no idea how I ended up with that raise/bonus, he has to approve the bonus/raise amounts. I called him out on his BS and told him he gets what he pays for. He then threatened to fire me if I didn't go back my old level of output and said the people I had been training in complex projects could take over for me soon so I wasn't as necessary as I thought. I laughed and asked him what he was talking about, I hadn't been training anyone. He went quiet and muted. He was clearly messaging bitch boss asking about the training. Because he unmuted a few minutes later and changed his entire attitude. Agreed it was awful of bitch boss to do that to my bonus/raise and asked what he could do to make it right. I didn't care at that point and knew he needed me more than I needed him so I told him I need a 25% raise and 150% of the bonus on that new salary or I was quitting immediately. He tried to say that was ridiculous and could never happen etc. So I bluffed and told him I already had another job offer and was leaving anyway. He asked me to wait and he'd bring SVP onto the call. SVP tried to talk my demand down. At that point I realized it wasn't worth it. I refused the significantly lower counter offer, thanked the SVP for everything he did for me and said I was quitting immediately. VP tried to say I'll never get a good reference if I don't at least work a notice period. I just told him my ex-boss would give me a glowing recommendation of my time here so I didn't care and logged off. SVP tried to get me to come back a few times over the next week or so but I refused. A few weeks later I got a job offer and accepted. I've been working at the new company for a while now and it's pretty shitty. Better than the old company but nowhere close to what I had before with my old boss. Although old boss reached out and said he might have a position opening up in his new company in a month or two that I should apply for. So I'm looking forward to that. I've heard from people who are still on my old team that it's complete disaster at my old job. They are losing millions from not having the knowledge base to correctly complete the complex projects. They reached out to the other experienced guy from the sub-team and offered him a huge raise to come back after I quit. He refused. Everyone left on my old team is trying to leave ASAP and everything, even the simple stuff, is weeks overdue. Apparently bitch boss is getting thrown under the bus by VP and will be fired soon. Approval for everything? Okay, by user Siski_TV. So I'm in IT, and where I work, my team is awesome. We are usually allowed to our own devices about everything related to the network and equipment related to keeping everything running. Our manager usually just wanted reasons for everything, and if it made sense, it was cleared same day. Anyways, the present day, around the beginning of the year, our higher managers decided they're going to keep a tighter leash on spending and such, so they looked to the IT department because we do at times need $6K and of hardware for replacements, normal wear and tear over the year, and we recently did a $75K and network rebuild because of corporate decisions, but we've kept to the assigned budget. In order to keep IT under their thumb, they've switched to requiring submitting approvals before submitting the official purchase order. So the malicious compliance, the notice said essentially if IT needs to order it, we want to approve it first. So everything gets an approval form. IT needs $75 for more post-its? Approval form. Critical stuff for an immediate response? Approval form. Basically it's gotten to the point where something that took us 1 to 2 weeks for delivery now takes 4 to 5 weeks for the same thing, which has caused strains on everything we usually work on. Parts that need replaced are still on order, so stations and computers are offline until replacements are approved. It's satisfying watching the management scramble to mass approve things once it's brought up as impacting the site's work. Minor edit to correct a few things: if line breaks don't show, apologies but I'm on mobile.